All right, I'm going to go ahead and call to order this meeting of the Santa Barbara Unified School District's Board of Education for Tuesday, May 9th, 2017. And we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Matsuoka.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Buenas tardes. Si alguien del público llegara a necesitar equipo para interpretación, lo tenemos disponible por esas dos puertas dobles. Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Santana. And we also have headsets available for the hearing impaired. Those are available at the side table there if anybody needs them. Moving on to item number 5, introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recognitions. And Ms. Carey, it looks like we have a monthly student board report.
We do. I'd like to introduce Noelia Ramirez from San Marcos High School. Welcome, Noelia.
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez.
All right. Let's see if this is a good height. Okay. Hi, I'm Noelia Ramirez. I'm a current senior at San Marcos High School, and I am the ASB Student Board Representative. First off, we have Dos Pueblos High School putting on various events. Their social awareness activities during the month of May will focus on Military Appreciation Month, Teen Pregnancy Prevention Month, and National Foster Care Month. Intercultural relations activities during the month of May will focus on Asian Pacific American Heritage Month and Jewish American History Month. Senior Awards Night will take place on Tuesday, May 23rd from 6:30 to 9 p.m. in Ealing's Performing Arts Center. And class office elections and leadership for the 2017-18 class interviews will be held May 25th, 26th, and 27th, with the announcements of new class officers on May 31st. At my own school, San Marcos, we'll be having senior prom on June 3rd at the University Club from 8:30 to 11:30 p.m. And after prom will be hosted at Zoto's until 3 a.m. On May 31st, we'll be hosting ASB Awards presentation in the Greek Theater. On May 26th, we'll be having our Memorial Day ceremony in front of the Vietnam Memorial Wall, which some of you might know that it was the first Vietnam memorial in the country, and it was dedicated in 1979. And it will be our third year hosting the Memorial Day ceremony. And May 11th through 13th, as well as this past weekend, the spring musical Damn Yankees will be taking place starting at 7 p.m. And I've heard it's really good, so. And Santa Barbara High School, May 12th, dodgeball tournament finals at lunch in the gym will be taking place. And May 13th from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m., prom will take place at the Santa Barbara Historical Museum. And May 26th from 7 to 9:30 p.m., the spring dance concert will be taking place in the theater. And on May 30th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., the Seniors Honors Night will be also held in the theater.
All right.
That's all that's going on in the district.
Thank you very much. There's a lot, especially the end of the year. Okay. Announcement of closed session action. We have no action to report out of closed session. We will be taking action on item B1 in open session on student discipline. We were not able to get to item B5, so we continued closed session, and we will come back to it at the end of this meeting, at the end of this open session, and then afterwards we will report out specifically on item B5 in open session. And that brings us to the superintendent's report. Mr. Matsuoka.
We have some bittersweet news to share from our district because Dr. Amy Alzina last night was appointed superintendent principal of Cold Spring School District. And I think we all know Amy really well. She's been in the district, I think, 17 years or maybe longer. And as I shared with the staff at Adams this morning, she's been principal 8 years, which is rare in principalships. Most principals don't stick around that long. And And I shared with Dr. Alzina and with the Adams staff, it shows in their school. It shows in how far they've come and the growth that they've made. So we congratulate her, but it is bittersweet. She's a great leader. She's been a great presence in our district. And I shared briefly with the Adams staff, we've already posted the position electronically, and it will run in the EdCal periodical 2 cycles. And we've set an interview date, I think it was June, first week in June. So the goal is to identify the future leader of Adams quickly because the school year is almost concluded. And then on another doctor note, so Dr. Raul Ramirez is not here in person, but he came back to work this week. He walked in and we just all gave him hugs and cheers, and it's good to hear his voice. He's good. But I gave him the night off because he's got to come back slowly. His recovery is, it's going to take some time. There was some major, health challenges, but he's already talking to us about what we need to do. As it just was great. He was back in form. Well, let's talk about that. So it's wonderful to have him back. So we're back at full strength, and that's good as we close out the year.
All right, that brings us to board comments and correspondence. Fellow board members, anything to share? Mr. Ulloa. Or should I say Mr. Paredes Ulloa?
Mr. Paredes Ulloa.
Mr. Paredes Ulloa. Many congratulations on your, that's my board comment. Congratulations on your marriage and on your new name.
Thank you. So one thing I did want to mention is SBCC hosted a Equity Leadership Conference for high school students, not last Friday, the Friday before, and I just want to say what a great experience it was. I got to, since I work at SBCC, it was easy for me to just go and mingle with the event. It was great to see students from La Cuesta, from SB, Dos Pueblos, San Marcos, just coming together in this really great environment, listening to some amazing keynote speakers, going to some great breakouts, and then just enjoying each other's company. It was just a great experience. I loved it. It really is about just bringing together these communities. I know when I was in high school, it was like, oh, those DP kids, the San Marcos kids. But being able to bring them all together and just really give them an opportunity and a space to feel safe, to be able to have real conversations with each other, it did my heart really good. And I'll be sharing some of those pictures and some videos. Superintendent Ben, I'm blanking on his last name for some reason.
Not of SBB? No.
Santa Monica now. God.
Oh, Dr. Jody.
Thank you. I don't know why I just blanked. I know too many Bens probably.
I just feel like you need to blank on somebody's last name. So what goes around comes around.
Dr. Jodi's son, I'm happy to report, won the impromptu dance competition that we had at SBCC that same day, which is awesome. I'm sure he holds that as a high accolade as well. But hopefully, as an SBC student and also as an employee and as a school board member, I hope we can continue this collaboration and be able to make this bigger event next year and hold it for more students, because I think it is a really great opportunity for students to really feel their own power and get a chance to really explore their feelings, their thoughts with other students in a safe environment.
Great. Ms. Capps.
So, forgive me, on a very personal note, I just wanted to acknowledge my Uncle Roger and my family just walked in, and my Uncle Roger Capps was a long time elementary school principal in Portland, just turned 80 and is here visiting, so it's just nice to have him here in this family of educators. And Oscar is here from Roosevelt, room 3.
All right, Dr. Reed.
So what Laura didn't say, though, it is her birthday. So wish her happy birthday, Laura. And so I think we need to acknowledge that. And also we had a Teacher Appreciation Week last week, and I briefly was able to go in and see what the district was doing. And I just wanted to comment on Mr. Tarina's excellent ability to MC all the prizes. And it was great to see a lot of the staff there. And thank the district for doing the work that they're doing to support teachers.
Great. All right. Do we have any public comment on non-agenda matters within jurisdiction of the Board of Education?
So we have Dr. Beverly Schwartzberg. Would you like to come on down?
A librarian. Pretty much.
Exactly. So thank you, friends. I'm Bev Schwartzberg, and I am the Adult Literacy Coordinator and Library Services Coordinator for the Santa Barbara Public Library System. And I'd like to say very proudly that I'm an old high school history teacher, public high school history teacher, and very happy to be here. I'm just here with a piece of information, a piece of news, and I wanted to let the board to know about a project that the Santa Barbara Public Library is working on under the state's Adult Education Block Grant, which in our case is administered by Santa Barbara City College. The project that we're working on is designed to provide free training for parents and volunteer tutors and other members of the community, any other members of the community, who want to be able to help children and adults with dyslexia. So it's a big project. A lot of you have heard a little bit about it. We've already had a number of public programs, and I want you to be on the alert, look for more. I also want you to know that we'll be offering an 18-hour, no-cost training for community members who want to learn how better to instruct children and adults with dyslexia. Our wonderful consultants for this are Dyslexia Training Institute out of San Diego, who, like me, actually have their roots in library literacy programs. I just wanted the board to know about the projects and have an opportunity to find out more, to ask questions, and to stay informed about this great community initiative that will be taking place really over the next year or so. So the training is taking place May 20th, 21st, and June 3rd. It is the first of 3 iterations. We will be offering this training 3 times during the year with our consultants, so 3 18-hour trainings. And I am always happy to answer questions. I'm easy to find. I'm in that big building in Anapamu and Anacapa. Many of you know how to find me there. And I just wanted to have an opportunity to let the board know about it and let the public know about it as well. So thank you so much for letting me speak.
Can I just ask briefly, Dr. Schwartzberg, is there a page dedicated to it on the library's website?
There is not a page dedicated to it on the library's website. What there is information on the library's events calendar.
On the events calendar.
So if you go to events calendar and you use dyslexia as the search term, you will find any current events that are listed.
Super. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to say, acknowledge the fact that I think you wrote that grant. Is that correct? That brought this forward.
That is correct.
So congratulations, and thank you for bringing that forward for our public.
I really want to say the Adult Education Block Grant process that began under AB 86 with Santa Barbara City College and all community college districts across the state allowed adult education really to be examined. And this district did a wonderful job of looking at the needs of adults with disabilities, and they produced a very comprehensive report about the needs of adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But it did not include learning disabilities, and so this grant proposal was meant to address that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that brings us to item D, acceptance of donations.
I just do have a couple questions.
On the donations?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Of course I do. No. Actually, I think I may have gotten the answer to one of them with regards to the memorial. There was a donation to the Veterans Memorial, and I was just wondering, is that the same event that the young lady just talked about today on your donation sheet? I think it's on page. Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I see that on there.
Hello?
It's working now.
I see it on there, but I have no way of knowing if that was the donation that she's talking about, but I can check.
Okay. And then my next question was, can you explain what WePay is? Is that just a vendor that was under the donor as WePay?
You saying WePay?
WePay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, under girls lacrosse
Under
program at
girls
the very
lacrosse.
On page 3.
Yes, that's the donor's name.
There is a company called WePay, so
So it's
I
like
don't know that.
PayPal or?
I will confirm what that is.
Okay. And then the one last question, there was a donation, I believe that, now this is on page, just to help out, page 4, with regards to senior assistance. What type of assistance were we doing? It's from the Santa Barbara High School PTSA, so what type of senior assistance were we doing?
I will check on that.
Okay,
But it's yeah.
okay.
Probably helping students out with graduation, seniors with graduation. Ms. Carey's nodding, yeah.
Okay.
It's graduation costs, things like gowns and things like that. All right. Is there a motion to accept these donations?
I move that we accept the donation with appreciation for their generous donations and support to the schools.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously. This moves us to the consent agenda. Are there any items that board members need to pull? Okay, I need to pull item E7. This is the approval of the Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy engineering machine shop teacher, but we'll discuss that at the end of the meeting. With that pull, do I have a motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. And moving to public hearing, and we're actually right on time. Instructional materials. Okay, at this point, I'm going to close the regular session and open the public hearing to talk about proposed recommendations for high school math and secondary world languages. Ms. Carey.
This would be the opportunity for anyone to speak to the recommendation made at our last board meeting, April 25th, to recommend college preparatory mathematics for high school math courses, Math 1, 2, and 3, and a variety of publishers' materials for world languages. D'accord for French. We have a French teacher here, if anybody has any questions about that. That's fortuitous. And we're still waiting on our native speakers adoption. There's not a new proposed adoption for Latin, and que chévere for Spanish for secondary grades.
Great, and are those materials now available?
Yes, those
Where?
materials have been on display and for community review in the superintendent's office since April 27th.
And how long will they be available?
Until May 23rd, when we
next
hope to bring
meeting.
it before you for action, for approval.
Great. So board members, if you haven't taken the opportunity to browse through them, I'd recommend that you make a little bit of time to take a look through them. All right, we don't have any public comment on that at this point, so I'm going to go ahead and close this hearing and reopen the regular session. And first up is item G1, approval of Peabody Charter School renewal. And I'm going to say Mr. Matsuoka, who's taken this on.
Yes, so the board has had a chance to review Peabody's charter renewal, and we had a public hearing opportunity, I believe it was the last board meeting. I see Damien in the back, in case there's any questions. But Peabody's been part of Santa Barbara Unified for 27 years, so it's really, if the board has any last questions about this, and we're asking the board to approve this charter renewal.
Board members? Gosh, I can't believe you don't have people stampeding because you're worried, Mr. Barnett. But would that all charter school relationships were in this positive a condition, right? I guess I would just ask if you would be willing to come up to the podium. It's 190 pages, and is there any significant changes in there that you were seeking, or is it essentially a continuation of what we have? And what about a facilities agreement? And maybe that's a Mr. Hetyoung question.
Mr. Tay.
Or Mr. Tay question, okay.
Happy to answer both those questions. There aren't significant changes to the charter itself, where, the relationship, like you mentioned, is very positive, and we're on a positive trajectory. I mean, what we're doing internally is definitely a little bit different, but in terms of the agreements with the charter, they're pretty much the same. The facility use agreement and the memorandum of understanding are currently being worked on. So I'm working with Meg Jate in her office on the MOU and the FUA, along with Mr. Hetjunk. And so we're hoping to bring those documents to you in the next couple of board meetings, certainly before July 1.
Oh, super.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's great to know. Any other questions on that? Anybody want to make a motion?
I wholeheartedly approve the Peabody Charter School renewal.
I second.
All right, that was moved by Dr. Reed, seconded by Ms. Capps. All those in favor? Aye. That passed unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And we talked about our teachers last week, or the last time we met, I should say. Now we have item G2, adoption of Resolution 2016-17-41, recognizing May 21st through 27th, 2017 as Classified School Employee Week. Mr. Turina.
President Parker, board members, and cabinet, I bring before you the resolution of 2016-17-41, recognizing May 21st through the 27th of 2017 as the Classified School Employee Week. The California legislature has designated that the third full week of May each year shall be designated as Classified School Employee Week. The recommendation to the board is that we adopt this resolution as stated. I would entertain any questions.
Board members, you've read it. Is there anything that you feel needs tweaking or any comments that you would like to make? Dr. Reed.
I think it's a great idea.
Yes, absolutely. They're critical to the work that we do in our schools, and I think it's very important that we recognize that as well. All right, we do have a resolution that needs to be passed.
I move to approve the resolution.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Aye. And it passes unanimously. Resolution 2016/17-41. Thank you. This brings us to item G3, Peabody Stadium update, results of the public bidding process. Mr. Matsuoka.
So I'm going to have Mr. Hetjunk share with the board the results of the bid, and we'll just work through that part. We are recommending a rejection of all bids, which then leads to the big question, now what? And then I'll take over at that point, and I've written up a narrative about the project and where I see our risks and opportunities. And we also have Mr. Price here because he's really important to this project as our construction attorney and just being really knowledgeable about construction delivery. We just want to present a plan moving forward, and we would love to have, conversation with the board. So first, the bid results. Mr. Hetjunk.
Thank you, Mr. Matsuoka. President Parker, members of the board, we did open bids on April 26th at 2 p.m., and the bid results are one of the attachments on the agenda. During the bid opening, it was a little bit of a shock to mentally add up the numbers as the packages were being opened. We had 20 packages that were bidding as part of this project. These 20 packages included all of the construction except for 2 contracts that we expect to award under a CMAS or piggyback type contracts for the actual track surface and turf surface. Turf surface was scheduled to be similar to San Marcos High School, and the track surface is scheduled to be a Mondo track, such as the type that you see during the Olympics. And that's what the Santa Barbara High School Foundation, the main emphasis of their fundraising was the track and field portion of this project. The bottom line is that, as you can see from the bid result tabulations, some of these packages had a definite lack of competition, which you would automatically, in my industry, think that a lack of competition results in a higher bid amount. The bid amounts were in excess significantly over our estimated budget and over the amount of money that the board authorized for the project. We feel we can regroup and do better, and we are asking the board's permission to direct us to reject all bids and return the bid bonds to the contractors.
Could I ask Mr. Rouse if you could shrink that down so the public could see more of the bid results? Yeah.
One package received no bids.
One of the things that I look for when you see bid results is I look for, I call it the degree of grouping, or I guess closeness versus ranges of bids. And there are some bids where the ranges were different by 30%, which it just told us and tells me that either it's the environment out there or the lack of competition. There's just a lot of factors. Usually I see bids coming in pretty closely, aligned. Maybe 5, 7, 10%, but there were some that were really big gaps. So that's important data to note.
Can I just ask, are these local construction companies or are they out of the area?
A lot of them are local, some of them are not.
Dr. Reed.
Yeah, and who are the common bidders? Like, I see Frank Shipper, we usually have worked with them in the past. I mean, are there certain companies that we've done business with?
We have done a lot of business with Frank Shipper Construction Company, both in traditional design bid build projects and lease-leaseback projects. We've had excellent project results. They bid a number of the packages and were the low bidder on a significant number of them. And some of these packages, again, the contractor listed will have subcontractors that will be working for them too. So this is by no means the list of all the contractors that would be involved in a project once it was awarded. But those would be the people that we would have the main contract with.
Mr. Paredes Ulloa.
So you mentioned that in the narrative that some of the, this is kind of the consequences of there being such a robust, I guess, construction boom going on right now, a lot of business. Is there anything, could the timing have affected it as well as far as when we put it out to bid, or I'm just kind of searching for why there's such a poor showing?
I think it's a combination of factors of contractors are busy. There is a construction going on with all of the state bonds and local school bonds that have passed in the recent months or year. I don't think a lot of these contractors, subcontractors may have been that familiar with the delivery method. Some of them may have been uncomfortable in bidding as a prime when they're used to working for a general contractor. We've talked about trying to make things more attractive to contractors by packaging, well, under a regular design bid build, you'd have one general contractor, and it would be their responsibility to go out and solicit subcontractors, and we would think they would want to solicit many subcontractors to lower their bid. So whether subcontractors were too busy, didn't have time to bid, had other priorities. I know this was bid during prime bidding time to get everything set up to start during the summer. If it's delayed a little bit, maybe we'll attract some contractors who were busy during the summertime and have some time coming up in the fall where they wouldn't be so busy. But I think it's just a construction boom throughout California that I don't think we realized that we would have the inflation rate that we do in hindsight, and the lack of competition. Lack of competition is essential to getting good bids. I should say competition is essential to getting good bids, and the lack of will traditionally raise the bid price. And like what Mr. Matsuoka said, you look for that grouping of bids. If you get a tight group, that tells you as a district that you have a good set of documents, that everybody is looking the same and interpreting the same, and that's why their prices are clumped together. When they're varied to a large degree. It may be somebody's very busy and just throwing extra money in there. If they get the project, fine. If they don't get the project, fine, because they have plenty of other work going on.
I'm going to weave in comments, and we can go back to the document. We were trying to get this project done between graduations, and that was a noble goal. But to break ground right after graduation this June, and then have the project done before next graduation, I think contractors looked at that timeline and said, okay, if you want, I'll bid on it, but that's a pretty compressed timeline, and I think that's something that the team talked about. I think we have to be a bit more flexible with the project duration. I mean, we're definitely going to now miss one graduation, and this one's fine. It's, let's see, what is this in? So 2018, this project's now going to spill across that graduation, and I think we've got to be flexible, because if we try to compress it, here's the result. We get some really high prices. So that's one of the things that we learned.
Ms. Sims-Moten.
And I think that was answering the question that I was thinking about. Even going back out to bid, was it going to really eliminate the fact that you still have a competition issue because you're busy? But maybe stretching it out farther, a little farther out, will help that.
I think that will help. And I think the general contractors typically have a group of subcontractors that they deal with all the time, and they will probably be more successful than the district or the construction manager was at getting those people interested in the job and getting them to participate in a bidding as a subcontractor.
Ms. Capps.
My question is just, how unusual is this to reject all of the bids? Is this a big red flag, I guess, is my concern for the project? Or just
It's a red flag for this project for sure, but it happens. It does happen where we have horrible surprises.
Yeah. We have recommended in the past that we reject all bids. Most of the time, it was an instance of the price being over budget, and whether we came back to the board with a reduced package at a reduced price. In this case, it's kind of hard to totally reduce the package of what we're doing, but in some cases in the past, we have reduced the scope of work, put it back out to bid, come to the board, and done a part of the work that we could accomplish within the budget.
Mr. Paredes Ulloa?
Other than the timing being affected, is there any concerns about the prices going up, continuing to go up, with this delay or any further delays? Because, again, we've seen the effect of inflation for the prices. I'm just wondering what kind of timetable we're on, what kind of pressure are we under to try to get this started?
You don't want to let too much time pass, because you are correct. If you take steps to make the project more attractive and do this, what you think is necessary to reduce the price, you don't want to wait too long and have inflation eat up the savings that you've projected. If the board does reject all contracts and does agree with our proposal for moving forward, we would advertise the project right away and hopefully award a contract in July.
What about, so on the narrative here, it recommends going back out to a general contractor delivery model instead of multiple prime. What about the idea of using lease back?
We talked about using lease back. It was one of the options that we did discuss. Again, going with a lease back under the new rules would mean going out for an RFQ to select a contractor, and we felt that that would delay the project and may not result in a better price, kind of picking the method that we thought would give us the best price in lieu of the budget. And I'm sure Mr. Price can talk more eloquently about all of the requirements of the new lease-back process, but we basically have to spend time to give contractors to give us their qualifications.
Okay.
That was our first thought, is to explore lease-back. But after discussions, what's really important to make sense is what is sort of the actual accurate market price for this project. So we actually have some data. I would say that it is market pricing, but I'd say it's inaccurate because I think there was some setup on the whole bidding process that inflated the price. Leaseback is best used when you've got that builder identified when design began 2 to 3 years ago. All right, so as we move forward, we're going to bring leaseback to our significant projects, but trying to bring a builder in at this point it's really hard because you've got to negotiate that price with the builder based on estimates that they're going to get, we're going to get. So that was our first thought, but here's where I think the strategy has landed. And this is my observation. The construction market in Santa Barbara is medium to small. You know, I come from the Bay Area where you've got a lot of contractors, a lot of big companies. And I think to get the best bidding coverage, we've got to look for builders who have the capacity to deliver a big project. I mean, for some companies, this is small, but for some companies, it's big or even on the edge of their capacity to deliver. And I think we've got to broaden the bidding environment to be statewide so that we get some, you know, contractors from Southern California who would look at this. If we said, here's the whole package, you get to bid on everything, we've got to get better coverage, which means I'm not a fan of the general contractor model because, you know, there are issues with it, but I think given the result, it's our best strategy to get a better price. Okay, I want to walk the board through something that we observed and learned, and Brian, if you could switch to the narrative. I think we've had, was it 1 or 2 meetings with KBZ Architects and Lundgren as a construction management firm. And I mean, my first thought is, how can we get this project to be not so expensive? So the longer we looked at this, just from a design standpoint, if you go all the way towards the end, and these are some estimates, actually go up a little more, right there. And we're going to tighten up this number. About 70% of this project, you won't see it when it's all done. And when I say you won't see it, you won't see the massive storm drain that we have to resolve. It's, you know, these are 2 42-inch tunnels. I mean, not just pipes, they're tunnels. It's not our responsibility, but as I explained in the narrative, if we're going to tackle this project, now's the time. Because if you're going to tear the whole site up, you should do it now. All of the retaining walls, all of the things. I mean, you would see a retaining wall, but you kind of won't. When you go to a football game, you know, people don't go, wow, isn't that the most beautiful retaining wall? Your fault. But here is the geographical challenge. 100 years ago, a track was placed in that bowl, and they just built a track. They had no idea what CIF high school standards would be 90 years down the road. So to create the space, we literally are cutting into the hills on 2 directions. And so, and this is, I just asked the team, so what % is just like supporting stuff? We think it's 70% of the project is all that infrastructure, because I've listened to the challenges and frustrations about this project kept getting more and more expensive. It got expensive because there's so much infrastructure to set up and do in order to get the stadium there. I mean, we looked at how could we simplify the stadium. Turns out it's not the major expense. And if we were to simplify the stadium, we actually might not get all of the state seismic retrofit money. So you might save $1 million or $1.5 million, and then you don't get the money from the state, so that's a wash. So part of what we're trying to frame for the board and for the community, I mean, it's a big project, is we need to accept that this project has some complexity that at first glance you wouldn't appreciate. So all the stuff above the ground that you're going to see that people will actually sit in and touch and use, the students, it's probably only 30% of the total cost. And that's something that we just have to recognize. Like, I wish we could cut like 15 to 20% off the project costs. If you did that, you almost can't do the project.
Dr. Reed?
So you said the total of the bids came in at 30 million and it was set at 18 million. So what is your projection if we go to a general contractor as to what this will end up to be? I mean, what do we have to look forward to?
I'm going to interject that it would be premature for us to give you a number, because I actually want the contractors who bid on this to give us that number. But I will say that KBZ has authorized a second opinion on the cost estimation side, so we will get that number. And so that's going to inform what the target should be. I've also seen the historical documents of this project was in a lease-leaseback delivery method. We actually had a tentative budget. Was that ever shared with the board along the way?
I believe it was.
So the reason why I'm looking for that is because I don't want to give a number out that the contractors will go, okay, that's my target. But it was about $25 million. So that was the budget space that a lease-back delivery model was headed towards. And that was 18 months ago? It was longer, maybe 2 years ago. So when I saw that number, in light of the bids coming in at 30 million, if the lease-back target price was hovering around 25 million, I think the bidding's going to come in probably around 25 million. I hope it's lower because our budget's difficult, but we'll see what the bids come in at.
Ms. Sims-Moten?
I actually went on Google to try to understand lease-back. Can you just give me a basic elementary what that means?
Sure. So what lease-back is, it's a delivery method where you put an RFP out to the building community and you get proposals of a builder, and there's qualifications, size, bonding, track history. And then based on performance, you identify a builder, the district would select that builder, and then we bring them into the design process, and they're working almost side by side, architect, district, and builder, honing in on the delivery price. And when that price is finalized, it becomes a contractual agreement. The builder must deliver it for that price. Now, the negotiating around that price gets intense because you picked one builder, and obviously they're going to come in with a number. The architect has to defend their design. In my opinion, I actually used a third-party estimator to validate everybody's numbers because everybody has an interest. The builder wants more money. The architects are the designers. We had a third-party estimator just to validate all of these numbers, because when we finally agree, that's what we are going to pay, and that's what the contractor has to deliver the project. So it's sort of like pre-negotiating the price on a project. And there's no change orders with that model. That's the beauty of it.
Mr. Paredes Ulloa.
So I just want to ask about the bidders. Anyone can pretty much bid, and you have to have a contract to be a construction company, et cetera. But is there any vetting on our side when we get in these bidders to make sure that they're of good quality? I was just thinking about the, I think it was like the pool/gym or something in Texas that was built. They raised millions of dollars for it, and then 6 months later, right before prom, all the concrete just cracked. And it was really ugly and a horrible thing for the students to go through.
All of our bidders, well, in California, any project over $1 million that is receiving state funds requires the contractor, the general contractor, and all mechanical, electrical, and plumbing subcontractors to be pre-qualified. They have to go through a pre-qualification process, and we have an outside agency that does that process for us. And there's some standards where they have to submit to this third party their financials, their history, their track record, who they've worked for. And that eliminates some of the contractors that would not be financially sound in taking on this project. As part of the construction project, we do have our inspector of record, And I'll take concrete for an instance. When we pour concrete, there is an inspector at the batch plant watching the mix, watching the concrete go in the truck. There's a certain amount of time that truck has from the time it leaves the plant till the time it has to be empty, or we can't use the concrete. And there's also the inspector there watching the placement of that concrete who's pre-approved the placement of steel. So your construction manager, your project manager, your inspector of record are critical in making sure that the plans and specifications that were approved by the Division of State Architect are followed. So these are some of the controls that we put on a project to try and eliminate something like that happening. In addition, the contractor will, as you'll see later on tonight, will post performance bonds and payment bonds. And of course, under California contract law, their work is guaranteed for 1 year. If there's some mistakes that were made or something that was done inaccurately, we have had contractors come back after that 1 year period and fix that problem at their cost.
And that gets expensive for them.
All right. Do you have another question, Mrs.
Yeah,
Brown?
I just was wondering where we are on talking to the city and the county for support.
I'll give a summary, and actually Mr. Price has been taking the lead on that. He's had conversations with the city of Santa Barbara. Actually, it's more the county board of supervisors. We've had that, opened that channel. We've also reached out to Congressman Carvajal's office. And so there's some good responses from both levels, Board of Supervisors, U.S. representatives. Now, I think those solutions are going to take a while for us to navigate. So we're pursuing every possible source of support. But let me go back to that inflation factor. We've planned a 5% inflation factor into our whole bond program. Right now, I check with my consultants in the Bay Area because I wanted to see what's going on there. They are seeing price hikes of 15% in 1 year. It's probably less in Santa Barbara, but I think the whole state, there's just a construction boom. And so when there's a lot of work, prices go up. So the inflation factor means that we need to get this project started as soon as possible. If we wait a year, I think right now the inflation factor is 8 to 10%. And just if you do the math, let's say it's 25 million, 10% is another $2.5 million. So waiting is not a good strategy, but we've got to get this project in and something more affordable. And you did read the news. The state seismic support went up significantly. That's another $3.5 million, so a total of $6.2 million of outside support. It's very significant. And I also want to, remind all of us, the Santa Barbara High Foundation has raised $5 million. And we've stayed in really close communication with them over the last couple of weeks, and they understand, they're patient, they're impatient.
I was going to say, they've been so patient.
They have, and they really were the engine that started the project around the track. And so there's still a lot of support for the project. We need to get that new estimate in, so we'll get that from KBZ. And then so what we're asking the board to take action on specifically is to reject the bids. And then what we're advising you is we're going to go out to bid under a one single contractor model. And we've got to work with our consultants to get that package designed to our best advantage. And so we'll work with Craig and our Lundgren, KBZ. We just got to get this package designed so that's the optimal project where somebody says, I want that project and I'm going to be competitive for it.
Thank you, and I appreciate the reminder that over $11 million worth of funding for this project is coming from outside of the bond program, from outside of the district. So thank you. All right, I do need a motion to reject all bids for the Santa Barbara High School Peabody Grandstand replacement, stadium renovation, and site utilities upgrade.
So moved.
Second.
That was moved by Mr. Paredes Ulloa, seconded by Ms. Sims-Moten. All those in favor? Aye. And that passes unanimously. And I'm sorry And I hope that we have better news the next time we hear more about this.
Thank you.
All right, this brings us to a series of items on student discipline. First up is item G4, board action on student discipline, case number 2016-17-43.
Yes, and in the case of 2016-17-43, I move to accept the stipulated agreement for full expulsion for one school year, which ends January 2018.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Next up is G5, board action on student discipline. This is case number 2016-17-47.
In the case of 2016-17-47, I move to accept the stipulated agreement for full expulsion for one school year, which ends January 2018.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. And that also passes unanimously. Bringing us to the last item, this is board action on student discipline, case number 2016-17-48.
In the case of 2016-17-48, I move to accept the stipulated agreement for full expulsion for one school year, which ends January 2018.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. At this point, we are going to take a 5-minute stretch break with the permission of my board, and we will be back to talk about the report discussion agenda shortly. And we are going to continue on with item H1. This is a report on contents of a construction contract. Mr. Hetyank.
Thank you, Mr. Matsuoka, and Ms. Parker, members of the board. Presentation tonight is to talk about what a construction contract consists of and what you typically will see at a board meeting and what you don't see. And so, first of all, let me talk about what typically you do see at a board meeting. I'll usually bring forward a proposal for a contract award, and if that contract award is typical of contracts over $175,000, I will tell you that we did our legal duty in advertising the contract, that we held the job walk. I will typically talk about how many contractors attended the job walk. I will give you a summary of the bid tabulation of all the bids. I will talk about the funding to make sure that we have the money in the bank before we award the contract, and then I will ask you to award that contract. This contracts typically consist of multiple parts, and I'd like to go to the agreement form as part of the backup. The paragraph right there that says contract. The complete contract includes all of the following contract documents. Everything in this paragraph becomes part of that construction contract when you award the contract. And many of these items you may not see. The front-end documents are boilerplate that's been developed by legal counsel. You also have our general conditions that are developed by legal counsel that the board has approved. You also have then the plans and specifications. But when we open a contract, we looked at things other than just who are the contractor and what is the price. And so those are the things that I wanted to talk about today, so you know what all goes into a contract, because we typically don't bring every piece of paper to the board because the board has already pre-approved the boilerplate forms. We just fill in the names and numbers and amounts. And so I wanted you to know what we do for our due diligence to make sure that you know what is in a contract. The agreement form basically gives the date of the contract award by the board, has the amount, and references all these other documents that would be part of the contract. We have on the next attachment are instructions to bidders. Basically, this becomes part of the contract. It lets the contractor know what he needs to do or she needs to do in filling out all of the forms that they need to submit with their bid proposal. And if I have any questions on these, please feel free to stop me as we go. I'm going to go through them a little bit quickly, as I don't want to spend a lot of time just reading through boilerplate of contracts. Bid proposal. It's important on the bid proposal that the contractor acknowledge any addenda. We make sure the contractor acknowledges all the addenda. That way, we know that they have looked at these items that are becoming part of the contract that weren't available on the date that they were able to access the plans and specifications. We ask them to give us the bid amount 2 ways, written and numerically, just to make sure that we don't misinterpret anybody's 8s or 0s, or typically these things are handwritten, and if you have them both ways, it's pretty easy to determine the exact amount. If every contract requires a bid bond of 10%, this is either a bond from a bonding company or a cashier's check, and what this does is ensure that the contractor's bid is valid and legal. And if a contractor decides not to enter into a contract with the district, then typically they would forfeit their bid bond and the district would keep the bid bond. In cases when we would not do that was cases where there was clearly an error on the part of the contractor in creating the bid that they can document and justify to the district that there truly was an error. In that case, we would go to the next lowest responsible bidder and see if, and then make a recommendation on whether or not to award that contract or not. California law requires subcontractors to be listed, not only their names, but their contractor license number and their what's called DIR registration. The DIR registration, DIR is the Department of Industrial Relations. That's the office in Sacramento that is in charge of ensuring that all people who work on construction projects in California that are valued over $1,000 are paid prevailing wages. So they have to submit certified payrolls showing who they paid and that they were paid at the proper level per their job classification.
Can I just pop in here and say then, if McGillivray Construction had, and am I pronouncing that right?
McGillivray, correct.
McGillivray. If they had subcontractors working on it with them, then you would have somewhere on this seen more contractors' license numbers besides theirs.
Right. Can we go down to the bid proposal document?
It's on bid proposal?
Bid proposal. And go ahead and scroll through that until we, page 6.
Oh,
the bid
okay,
proposal.
there they are. There they are.
There, we have the subcontractors. So any subcontractor that the value of their work is greater than 1/2 of 1% must be listed on this form. If their work is less than 1/2 of 1% of the total contractor, they do not have to list them. Also important is that the contractor cannot change subcontractors. So after he submits his bid, he can't go out to a subcontractor, say a painting subcontractor, and say, hey, you know, this contractor gave me price A, I'm going to give them the job, why don't you give me a cheaper price and I'll pocket the difference. And so I'll switch subcontractors. So you are not allowed to switch subcontractors from the contractors listed on your bid proposal. There is a method of substituting subcontractors if they are unable to perform or are not performing up to what they've contracted to do. But that's a totally different process and involves notifications and hearings post-contract award. So when you, these are things that we typically don't bring to the board to flood you with paperwork. Their bid bond, I spoke about. The contractor also provides a contractor licensing statement. He's stating to us that he is licensed to do business in the state of California. The next item on the attachments was a non-collusion affidavit. The contractor is basically stating with a notary signature that they have not conspired with any other subcontractors or contractors to fix pricing, to say, you know, you take this job, I'll take the next one, and this is the amount that we'll charge. Each contractor needs to let us know that they've given a good faith effort to engage bids from disabled veteran business enterprises, contractors who meet that criteria, and that's part of the requirement for receiving state matching funds, which we will be receiving on a lot of our projects. You are also required as a contractor to certify that you're not using any materials containing asbestos or lead-based paint. My fingers. Contractors also need to acknowledge that they do have adequate workers' compensation insurance. They need to acknowledge that it is a drug-free workplace, that is a tobacco-free workplace. They need to acknowledge that that their employees have undergone criminal background checks. In order to work on a construction contract in California, generally everybody is required to be fingerprinted by the Department of Justice. There are some exceptions. If you have a completely fenced area with a separate entrance where nobody has to access the school and there is no access between the construction area and the school or school employees, then not everyone has to be fingerprinted. But they cannot access any other part of the school grounds, including driving on school grounds to get to a construction gate. So even though many of our areas are fenced, most of our projects in this district are modernizations and additions where the contractor usually accesses the site to access the project. So that means everybody must be fingerprinted. The exception to not being fingerprinted is that the person that's not fingerprinted must be accompanied 100% of the time by somebody who is. And 100% of the time is strictly enforced, including going to the restroom. You are with that person you are within visual supervision of that person at all times. And that supervision can also be conducted and accomplished by a school employee, other than the contractor. So most of the time it behooves the contractor, because of the way we set up our projects, that everybody's fingerprinted. We don't have very many projects where we have a separate construction gate accessible from a public street. And so these are the things that are in a contract that are basically boilerplate. They've been pre-approved by the board as far as boilerplate. The only difference is now the contractors and subcontractors' names are filled in, and the parties associated with the contract are filled in. When you approve the modification for the general conditions for the multi-prime contract, we also had you again look at the general conditions for a project that was not multi-prime, and those would be the general conditions that we would use on contracts for design, bid, build, and lease back. Once the board awards a contract, the contractor has 10 days to furnish the district with a payment bond and a performance bond. These are the bonds that guarantee the contractor pays everyone and completes the work. So years ago, we had a contractor that was not performing at a satisfactory rate on a project, and we actually removed that contractor from the project. That process involved the bonding company. The bonding, we had to make sure, first of all, in many discussions with the superintendent and assistant superintendent of business services and legal counsel, that we were in a position where we felt we were justified and could withstand any legal challenge to removing the contractor. Once we felt comfortable with that, we notified a bonding company, and then the bonding company agreed and came in and took over the project and paid for another contractor to come in and finish the project. And so getting a bid bond, payment bonds, it is something that the contractors take seriously, because if they can't get a bond, they can't bid and work on a public construction contract for public works.
Mr.
So what happens?
Ulloa has a question for you.
Sorry, just going back to like the employees, is any part of the contract to do the contractors state if what percentage of their workers are union, or is that even a consideration? Just because
the contractor, whether it be a union contractor or a non-union contractor, or whether a subcontractor is union or non-union, must pay prevailing wages. Now, the contractor can pay, as a subcontractor can pay above prevailing wage if they wish, but in a minimum, they are required to pay prevailing wage, which in most instances is the union rate. So if a person is a non-union employee of a non-union subcontractor, they would be basically making the same money as if they were a union employee, because the state of California deems that anybody working on our projects is paid prevailing wages. And then that is reflected in the certified payroll.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So once we send out the notice of award, the contractor gives us their other two bonds, and then the last step in the process is the notice to proceed. We tell the contractor, you've done your due diligence, you've given us all the paperwork you have, you are now free to mobilize and step foot on site. Contractors sometimes will try to access their site and set up their construction trailers before they have their bonds in. We say, no, you must wait for your notice to proceed. Then you can start your work and start your contract. And so I picked this project because I did not have a contract to bring to you for award tonight, although next board meeting, hopefully we will have numerous contracts for you to award, not the over 20 that we had once thought for that board meeting, but there will be hopefully a number of contracts that you are awarding at the next board meeting for work that we want to take place this coming summer. And so I wanted you to have a comfort level of what we do behind the scenes that you may not see, that is boilerplate, that you've pre-approved that boilerplate, and want to make sure you're comfortable that we're doing our due diligence to make sure that we meet all the statutory requirements and bring a contract to you for award.
All right, incredibly helpful. All right, Mr. Paredes Ulloa?
So once a contractor has been identified, from beginning to end to the notice to proceed, what is usually the average timeline for that?
They have 10 days to get their bonds into us, and once we have their bonds, we will immediately issue them a notice to proceed via fax and follow it up with the U.S. mail.
Ms. Sims-Moten?
Yes, thank you I appreciate not bringing all the paperwork back. But my question is, how often do you update the boilerplates?
We typically would update supplementary conditions due to changes in statutes and laws, and when that list becomes a little bit cumbersome, we consult with legal counsel and say, should we at this time update our general conditions to include all the recent changes? So the answer in time really depends on changes in the law. If there are not a lot of changes in the law, we don't bring it back that often. I think since I've been a director of facilities, we've updated it 3 or 4 times in 17 years.
Okay, and then one follow-up question to that. So when you update it, is that listed on that boilerplate document at the bottom, at the top, when the last revision was, so that we know we're looking at the most recent boilerplate when we pre-approve it?
Once you approve the new general conditions and boilerplate, the old ones are not used, and we use the new ones, but I do not believe we have a board authorization date or a board approved date on the bottom page of that boilerplate, but if the board wishes to do so, we could easily add something to that effect.
Well, I just think in terms of being a new board, we're not really sure when it came, and we may be coming in the middle of the revision, so that would be helpful. So not to add additional work, but it would just be helpful to know that we have the most updated document.
I'm watching Mr. Price's head move a bit affirmatively, but I would love to hear your opinion about this, because we usually don't date stamp contract templates. We do with board policy, we do with ARs, and And
while Mr. Price, I'm just suggesting that because sometimes things have come and it's outdated, and I just want to make sure we have the most recent information.
Well, I frequently have the same problem you do. And when I go into my computer directory and I pull out a document, I'm wishing that it had a date at the bottom that said, SBSD, whatever, revised, and that would just be part of the footer. I think that would be a very prudent move. Could I add one more thing that Mr. Hetjonk left off? Not because he was not being diligent. I think it was an excellent presentation, but I think you said you've been doing this here 17 years, and during the 15 years that I've had the opportunity to work with facilities staff, and I think this is really important, and it shows you why these documents are important. There haven't been any lawsuits. I think there was one that started out briefly that was, I'll just say, extinguished.
A bogus claim?
I'm not going to go that far. Now, that's not the common experience, quite frankly, in many, perhaps even most districts. For all the projects that have gone under the 2000 bond and 2008 and this one and on and on and on, at all of the campuses throughout Santa Barbara School District, there haven't been any lawsuits. And the reason is because you've had...
Mr. Tay was a little bit over there.
You've generally worked with great architects, very tight plans and specifications. They squeeze out attempts at getting a lot of inappropriate change orders. They do away with ambiguities that I see in other school facility project documentation. In addition to that, you've had a great facility staff that really monitors these projects and watches as the process and the projects unfold. And they stop things and they correct things and they're insistent. And they have a good team of inspectors that come in and work with them. So it's really been terrific. And I see in other districts, including some of them in the North County that I don't work with, these $14 million judgments that they get on tilt-up buildings and on and on. And it can be a nightmare. But that's one expense that hopefully you're going to continue not to see in the various reports that come before you. And I think credit belongs with Mr. Hetjonk, along with his very capable staff that he's had in the past and continues to have.
Thank you very much.
Okay, there you go.
All right.
I've received some excellent training along the way, too. So.
All right. Well, our time is up for this particular item. Incredibly helpful, especially as we prep for the next one. So thank you for thinking of bringing this forward and for the excellent presentation, Mr. Hetjonk. And that brings us to H2. This is the Teacher Induction Program, otherwise known as TIP. This is an update for Santa Barbara Unified School District's Board of Education, Mr. Chirina. And I see that Ms. Stern is here in the audience.
Right. Thank you, President Parker, board members, cabinet. I'd like to ask Roxana Stern, our Teacher Induction Program Coordinator, to come up and present this information.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hoping to give you an update tonight on where we stand with our Teacher Induction Program. Again, I'm Roxana Stern, and I am the Teacher Induction Program Coordinator. It was a year ago this month that you gave approval for our district to move forward to develop a Teacher Induction Program. Currently, our teachers are being served by the Santa Barbara County Education Office, and it was the goal of this district to develop our own in-house program in an effort to serve our teachers differently. Because a teacher induction program results in the participants receiving a clear teaching credential, we have to go through a process to become accredited by the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. The graphic that you see in front of you shows you what that process looks like, and the arrow in the center shows you where we are. So we are essentially at the midpoint. Just recently, we were actually in stage 2, which is referred to as the eligibility criteria. What that consists of is our district submitting a document to the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, responding to 12 questions, providing assurances about our infrastructure that we have in place, assuring the Commission on Teacher Credentialing that as an institution we are fit to offer teacher credentialing programs. In April, we went before the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and I'm happy to report that we received unanimous approval of our proposal to become an institution that's allowed to offer teacher credentialing programs. Our next step was to submit the remaining 2 sets of documents, which are called preconditions and standards. Those were submitted later in April, and they are currently with the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. They have to go through a review process by a board of institutional reviewers, and once they've gone through that process, they go before the Commission at one of their regularly scheduled meetings. The Commission meets again in June, in the middle of June, June 15th to be exact, and we do hope to be on that agenda. If we are on that agenda and we are approved, we also need to go before the Committee on Accreditation, which is a subcommittee of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and their next regularly scheduled meeting is June 29th. So we hope that we make it through all of these steps by the end of June so that we can actually launch in fall of 2017 and serve our candidates through our district rather than contracting with the Santa Barbara County Education Office. At some point, we will become approved. I am confident in that. Again, whether that happens in June or whether we are delayed until the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Commission, which is in August, that part remains to be seen. Once we do receive approval, we move into a status of being provisionally approved, and then we need to run our program for 2 or 3 years so that a cohort can move through and so that we can provide data about our program to the Commission. And once those 2 or 3 years have passed, we are actually visited by an accreditation team that meets with our program participants and meets with our leadership to determine if we're actually doing what we said we were going to do. And if we successfully make it through that, then we are granted full approval and we go into an accreditation cycle. It's the position of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing that we should always be reflecting on our practice, and we should always be making changes and adjustments to best serve our participants and also, of course, best serve students in California. So it's not as though we move through the process, we're approved, and then never hear from them again. It's a continuous dialogue with the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Regardless of whether our district is providing the induction program or whether we continue to contract with the county education office, we are preparing for next school year. We have actually moved up our timeline of preparation. In my prior position at San Marcos High School, I was the site-based liaison for teacher induction, which meant that I was receiving emails in the month of July asking to identify mentors who would support beginning teachers. The county education office has decided we can better serve teachers as an organization, both the county education office and all of the districts that they support, if we start making those mentor identifications in the spring. So that's what we're doing this month. In fact, we began right after spring break reaching out to the currently participating candidates and to the currently participating mentors, finding out if they were going to continue to work together next school year or whether it was time for a change for a variety of reasons. Sometimes people leave the area, sometimes people change positions, and sometimes people just feel that perhaps there is maybe somebody else that they could work with more effectively. What we do know at this point is that we have 37 candidates who are currently first-year candidates, and they will be returning as second-year candidates in the fall of 2017. At the time that this was prepared, we had 18 new candidates, but I know we have some new hires in the pipeline, so a few of those I expect will be teachers who have preliminary teaching credentials. Of the 18 new candidates for next year, 2 of them are in their second year of induction, and these are teachers who have had a break in their participation in the induction program, either due to leaves of absence or relocating from another district. Again, there are a variety of factors that play into that. But of the 18 new candidates, 2 of them will join that second year cohort. So we have 55 candidates at present. We expect that a few more will become part of the candidate pool. And we currently have 41 mentors identified, but as you can see, they are supporting 46 candidates. That is because some mentors do support more than one candidate. We have 9 candidates who are still awaiting a mentor pairing, but we are We have made requests of the school sites to identify mentors, and they're, of course, considering several factors, such as master schedules and other additional responsibilities that the mentor teachers have. We often find that the teachers who serve as cooperating teachers for teacher credentialing programs from the universities are also mentor teachers, are also coaches for academic clubs, athletic teams, academic teams, so trying to balance all of those constraints. As you heard at the beginning of my presentation, we're playing a waiting game, basically. We're waiting to find out if we are approved to launch in the fall, and so we have to consider a couple of possible scenarios. Our hope is that the Commission will approve us in June so that we can launch in the fall. And we have been in a continuing dialogue with the County Education Office essentially since November of 2016. To just backtrack a little bit, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing is also constantly revising its guidelines for teacher preparation programs. And in November, they were discussing their newly approved guidelines for induction programs and decided that they didn't quite like their approval process. So they put a moratorium on all new approvals until they had the opportunity to refine their process. We had actually submitted our eligibility criteria at the end of October, and we were hoping to be on the Commission's December agenda, but we were delayed until February. So as soon as we knew that we were delayed, we reached out to the County Education Office and said, at this point, we really don't know. It's a super foggy future for us, so what can we do? And the County Education Office, I'm happy to say, has been very accommodating. They have been willing to work with us, even though it's a tremendous budget impact to them. If our cohort of 55 candidates doesn't come their way, it really affects their funding and their planning for the programs that they offer. But they've been very gracious and said they will look at both possibilities, and if we were to launch in the fall, then what they will do is provide transcripts to us showing all the work that the current participants have completed so that we can give them credit toward receiving their credential, which they would then ultimately receive from us. The provision of transcripts is a process that County Education Office already has in place, because every year there are candidates who at the midpoint need to relocate or move to another program. So that's nothing new for them. To have this many going to one entity is probably something that's new, but they will do that for us. We, on our end of it, if it turns out that we are not approved in time to launch for the fall, we will provide the mentor pairing information to County Ed Office. In fact, we're planning to provide that to them very soon because most of the hiring is finalized. We know there will be probably a few hires in the summertime and a few early in the fall, and we can still send those in to them. But it's an ongoing dialogue, and it has been a very collegial relationship between our district and County Ed Office as we go through this nebulous process. The big question, of course, for all of us is what is this going to cost? And due to changes in state finance, beginning with the 16-17 school year, we have had to pay a program fee to County Education Office of $2,500 per candidate served. And this school year, there are 69 candidates who are in the program, so that translates into a pretty high dollar amount. Additionally, mentors earn stipends ranging from $1,300 to $1,500 per candidate. To clarify, they receive $1,500 for their first candidate, and if the second candidate that they're supporting is in the same cohort, so let's say that a mentor is supporting 2 year 1 teachers, that mentor would receive $2,800 for a stipend. If a mentor is supporting a year 1 teacher and a year 2 teacher, that mentor would have additional meetings to attend, the way County Ed Office's program is structured, and in consideration of that, they would get a second $1,500 stipend. In our district, we currently do not have anyone mentoring candidates in 2 years. It becomes difficult to keep track of for the mentors, and so those who are mentoring 2 candidates are earning $2,800 in our district. Next school year, if we provide our own program, that $2,500 program fee would go away. The mentors would still earn stipends, and we opted to keep the same structure in place, and we did look around at nearby districts to see, or nearby counties to see what they were offering, and it was around that $1,300 to $1,500 range as well. A piece that I didn't mention up here is that we also are required to provide release days to both candidates and mentors in order to conduct classroom observations of one another or to work on other collaborative induction program activities, and so there is a cost for substitutes as well. That was provided in the narrative. It's simply not on the slide. If we were to continue to contract with Santa Barbara County Education Office, our overall outlay for that would be lower, and that's because we do have a smaller cohort that would be coming in next year. Our year one cohort is, again, it's currently sitting at 18 candidates, and that's replacing a, I want to say, 26 candidate cohort that's graduating out this year. So simply because it's a smaller group of people being served, it's about $66,000 less in cost if we were to continue to go with County Education Office. So at least that's some good news that I could share if that's the direction we need to go. So in closing, again, we are in provisional, or we're pending provisional approval with the Commission on Teacher Credentialing and remaining hopeful that we will be on their agenda. We are preparing for the 2017-18 school year, whichever direction that takes us. Our overall costs are decreasing. So I think all of that is hopefully good news for all of you, and I thank you for your time and welcome any questions or comments that you may have.
Thank you. Ms. Capps.
Well, thank you for that very well expressed presentation. I just have a basic question. Can you just describe what it takes to induct a teacher? What are you doing? Just give us some language and examples.
The goal of induction is to support somebody who has completed a teacher preparation program at a university, and they've received a great deal of theoretical background, and they've had an opportunity to practice with a cooperating teacher in a classroom. But now that they're on their own, the goal is to support them so they don't become isolated, to help with the day-to-day needs that occur, something as simple as the copy room code or a classroom management issue or a new conversation with a parent that they haven't had the opportunity to practice before, and also to induct a new teacher into the culture of the organization, whether that's their school site, their school district, or the profession in general. So to create those professional bonds that exist at so many levels. And the mentors are working with the candidates a minimum of an average of 1 hour a week. It doesn't have to be all at once. It can be 15 minutes here, 5 minutes there, an email, a FaceTime, what have you. But it's to provide support for the first 2 years that a newly minted teacher is in the profession.
And so is the mentor program the induction, or is that just part of the induction?
The mentoring is the foundation of the induction program, and those are the current guidelines from the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and that's based on research spanning approximately 20 years that induction programs have existed, and finding that the mentoring piece really is the most important piece to guarantee that a teacher has the support that they need to feel confident and competent, and also to remain in the profession and to be effective with kids.
Can you say those numbers again of how many mentoring hours would occur during the 2 years?
It would be a minimum of an average of 1 hour per week. So there are approximately 36 weeks in a school year, so approximately 72 hours. It's simply of mentoring, and we know that everybody goes above and beyond that.
And so every teacher that's brought into the district is part of this induction program?
Every teacher who has a preliminary teaching credential in the state of California, but you bring up a good question, which is how are we, I think the question that I'm interpreting is how are we supporting our new hires?
Right.
Part of this preparation for next school year is working with principals to develop plans to support at their sites the new hires that they have coming in, and those needs will vary tremendously. I know one elementary school in particular has had only one new hire this school year, whereas San Marcos High School had 14 new teachers that were in the induction program and had some new hires in addition to that were new to the campus but not necessarily new to teaching. So we're looking at that as well, and the principals have been very receptive to providing more support and talking about how that's going to look at each of their sites.
My last question, I know, is so the mentor is actually in the classroom with the teacher, like in action, essentially?
No, that would be in a preparation program at the university. So when somebody is student teaching, their cooperating teacher is in the classroom with them. The mentor will be on the same campus, though, with a few small exceptions. For example, if you had an elementary music teacher and they're the one person on campus who does that, their mentor might be on another campus. It might be another music teacher who's on another campus.
I see.
On the other hand, you could have an elementary music teacher mentored by a classroom teacher who's on that same campus. So whenever possible, the mentor is on the same campus.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions.
All right, Dr. Reed.
Yeah, thank you for your report, and I think it was a great move to be able to move it to the district so that we could decrease the costs as well as to really support the teachers and know what's going on. My question is, how do you choose the mentors? How are the mentors chosen for the program? And what criteria, for example, makes a mentor?
So the mentor criteria, we are looking for somebody who has at least 3 years of effective teaching practice, and that is, it shouldn't be based on their evaluations. It should be based on the site leader's impression of an effective teacher, and so we give some guidelines to site principals. Site principals do have to approve of all mentor pairings, and I will sometimes have candidates reach out to me and they will say, I've worked with so-and-so as my cooperating teacher, I'd love to be mentored by that person, and I say, well, thank you for letting me know your preference, but those mentor pairings are made with the approval of the principal, and then simply reach out to the principal and say, this person is interested in working with this person, but of course it's up to your discretion. I do encourage principals to look at finding a mentor other than the cooperating teacher, simply because part of the goal of this is to have teachers build a professional network, and if you're always working with the same person, that network is very small. So it's, to come back to your question, the qualifications, at least 3 years of effective teaching practice, somebody who has an interest in their own professional growth, continued interest in learning, interest in adult learning theory, interest in coaching. Those would be some examples of guidelines.
Do the teachers that have 3 years' experience, can they go to a principal and say, I really would like to be a mentor, or is it usually directed by the principal only?
Yes, mentors can go to a principal, and I've had those emails as well saying, I know there's somebody new at our school and I would love to work with them as a mentor, and that's another piece that we're looking at, is in providing information to our more experienced teachers of professional pathways that exist for them. I think, reflecting on my own teaching practice and conversations I've had with other teachers, you get to a point where that initial excitement of the teaching profession fades a little bit. I mean, certainly that enthusiasm is there for new content and new students, but you start wondering, well, what else could I do with this? How could I expand on what I'm doing and stay here in Santa Barbara? And I think for our more experienced teachers to consider becoming mentors would be a great opportunity, and it's one that really revitalizes you.
And one last question. In terms of the mentors, do they also have an opportunity to collaborate with each other so that they can sort of learn the skills and practices of each other and sort of build on that as mentors?
Yes, that's both something that we had wanted to provide within our program and also something that the state is asking us to do. We are asked to provide professional development to our mentors on an ongoing basis, again, in adult learning theory and providing coaching and dealing with people who are in various stages of their life and in their career. And also by design, we thought we would create a slightly different model than County Education Office, and there are pros and cons to each. But our model, we wanted to have the mentors meeting regularly with one another to share best practices, lean on one another, and expand their own professional network. So yes.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, we are running about 20 minutes over at this point, so if you have any other quick questions, let's share them now.
Can we go back to the slide that's tip and budget? I just had a quick question. Can you walk me through? So at SBU, we pay the SBCO $2,500 per candidate.
Yes, we do.
Currently.
Yes.
So then if we were to move it here, we would eliminate that cost.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Would our cost be increased in the district to bring that program here?
No, the cost in the district for the program is the teacher induction program coordinator salary, which is my salary and benefits. Okay. And then we have materials costs, which are minimal because the program is largely based on mentoring now. We do not need to provide direct instruction as was done before. And it would be essentially providing some refreshments and basic materials that would be needed at the regular meetings. But the cost would go down dramatically. And I'm sorry, the stipends would still be a cost, and the release days are still a cost. And the details are in your narrative.
Okay. And then so the 17-18 SBCEO, how would those costs be lowered? Is that
so the price per candidate remains the same, but we have fewer candidates. So we're going from 69 candidates to 55 currently. We may wind up in the area of 60 candidates, but I don't think we'll be as high as 69 candidates.
And that's if we brought it here?
Regardless, the number of candidates is the number of teachers with a preliminary teaching credential who are in our district.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Stern.
Thank you.
That brings us to our two final items on the not consent, I can do this, Ms. Wagenick. Dr. Wagenick, shoot. H3 and H4, first up is the report on program evaluation plan for student services. Dr. Wagenick.
Thank you, Ms. Parker, board, cabinet, and I will turn my microphone on. so I don't have to use what I call my assistant principal voice. I am pleased to bring to you the program evaluation plan for student services. We had spoken earlier this year about the number of community-based organizations that the district partners with to bring social, emotional, substance abuse, and mental health services to our students through the Student Services Department. I bring to you tonight the plan for our two bigger partners. Those would be the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse, or Kata, and tonight I'll speak specifically to the services provided to our secondary students. And also, and I wanted to spell it out because a lot of people don't know what it stands for: Attitude, Harmony, and Achievement, AHA, formerly the Academy of Healing Arts, but they underwent a rebranding several years ago. So Kata provides to our secondary students services through the youth services specialists, or who we refer to as our YSSs. Each of our junior high schools have one YSS. Our high schools now all have two YSSs, with the exception of La Cuesta, Alta Vista, who is served by one YSS. Those youth service specialists each teach usually 2 classes of what's called Reconnecting Youth. And Reconnecting Youth is designed to help students who want to reduce or stop their use of drugs and alcohol. So it's a semester-long course that they take each day. The YSSs also teach the super class, which is a class for families of students who are first-time drug and alcohol offenders. AHA services within our secondary district right now are limited to our high schools. They provide I can get this, it's social, emotional, intelligence training within our freshman seminar classes at Santa Barbara High School and San Marcos High School. In addition, they have for the last few years been providing, I think it's 3 years now, the Peace Builders program. The idea of developing a core of students who can help other students on campus peacefully resolve conflicts between each other, with teachers, and then also just out in the world. So going back to Kata, we have been in partnership with Kata, specifically the YSS services, for over 15 years, and during that time there's never been a formal internal evaluation of the program. Currently, it's a $290,000 annual cost, and about 5 weeks ago, I met with their executive director, Ed Stonefeld, and Selena Rockwell, who's the program director for the YSSs. They came to us asking for an additional $160,000 for 2017-18. Last year, when we talked about our partnership, we did talk about the need for Kata to really do their own evaluation. They have gone through the process with Dr. Guillermo Juan to get that going, and so that evaluation will take place in 2017-18. There has, up to this point, never been a third-party evaluation of the Kata programming. My plan is to do a comparison analysis between their third-party evaluation and the outcome of our evaluation. The methodology, and Dr. Guillermo Juan and I were not able to completely finalize the plan for this prior to her, she's going to have a baby, and so she's at home making sure that the baby arrives safely. But we talked about what that would look like. In terms of SUPER, which is, again, the program for families of first-time violators of Ed Code around drugs and alcohol, what I'm really interested in knowing is what is our recidivism rate of students who complete that program. That's something that I personally have wondered for a long time. And so we'll be looking at that. We'll also be doing, so primarily that will be quantitative in nature, looking at our own data that we have in ARIES. But also we want to look at, we do want to talk with some families who've completed the program and find out their perception of SUPER. We also, for Kata, will be looking at the Reconnecting Youth class. Now, Kata does an internal evaluation each year, a pre and post survey. What we want to do with this, again, is they also do a quantitative analysis of grade point average, attendance rates, et cetera, but we want to conduct our own data analysis and also do survey data of students who, for instance, maybe completed Reconnecting Youth in 8th, 9th, 10th grade, talk to them in 11th and 12th grade, and see how they're doing, but also look at their data several years down the line. So the super evaluation will be the first piece. We'll begin working on that in July with a goal to have that completed in October of 2017. And then Reconnecting Youth will comprise the remainder of the first semester next year. We'll be conducting that October to December 2017. Moving on to AHA. Again, we have worked with AHA as a district for 3 or 4 years, but AHA has been around for a long time, and sites have worked with them quite a bit. So it's time for us to do an internal evaluation. Currently, the annual cost, which is paid for a combination of LCAP and site contributions, is $100,000. In the time since I submitted this report, I was able to meet with AHA, and they are not asking for an additional $100,000 for next year. They will be funding that. So I promised them that I would report that to you. They've worked it out, and that they are going to be hoping to expand their services into our junior highs next year to expand the Peace Builders program, which when we talk about restorative approaches in a moment, we really are trying to use the Peace Builders in the RA process. So they believe that they'll be getting grant funding to do that. So AHA recently completed its own third-party evaluation, and in fact, I just received the results of that, and we'll be looking at that. So we are working with them. We'll do a comparison. Again, we'll do AHA evaluation will be more of a mix of qualitative and quantitative. We'll be conducting surveys of, in terms of the freshman seminar, again, what we want to do is survey juniors and seniors to see if the services they received as freshmen have stuck with them. And what's their perception several years down the line of what they experienced in freshman seminar. And then we'll also hold some qualitative focus group interviews with them. In terms of Peace Builders, we want to know the impact of Peace Builders on the Peace Builders themselves. There are about 60 in each high school, and that's important. So that will be the quantitative piece. But we also want to look at numbers in terms of what we're wanting the Peace Builders to do is help teachers facilitate proactive restorative circles in classes and reactive circles. So to remind teachers when to do circles, or If problems are coming up in the class that maybe the teachers don't know about, that the piece builders can be the ones to be a liaison and initiate that. So we'll be keeping track of that data as well. And then also we'll be holding some semi-structured interviews with the piece builders, but also with teachers and administrators to get their perception of how the process is playing out. Questions?
Mr. Paredes-Ulloa.
One, Dr. Wagner, aren't you done doing research? You just turned in your dissertation.
I don't have anything to do now, so I have to, I like research.
Question about the costs for the programs, like with Kata, $290 is the annual cost, but does that include in-kind, like the space? Because I know they have classrooms.
No. So that's $290, not including the in-kind. So in-kind services that we provide would be office classroom space, phones, and then also in-kind in terms of supervision of the YSSs. They really are, and members of our staff. I mean, they're employed by Kata, but they're part of our teams on the sites. And so providing them with support and so forth is a part of that in-kind.
And is that recorded anywhere? I mean, I think that would just be good. Is that recorded anywhere, the in-kind? Because I know with, like, when I ran CalSoap, we would get in-kind reports from the school district all the time for the space that we had, working with the school district, et cetera.
You know, that's interesting. Now that you bring that up, we provide in-kind reports for other, for instance, CAC, we provide them with one. That would be an example. But I have not experienced doing that for Kata, so that's
I just think it would be a good idea to have something.
It would be good to figure out.
Because if it's $290, but again, with CalSoap, we were being provided something like $60,000 just in space alone, that goes above and beyond what the direct costs are.
Right.
Yeah, good for both organizations, really. Any other questions on this?
Yes.
Ms. Sims-Moten.
Okay. Thank you. It was a great presentation. I think we started when we very first started when the question was about evaluation of existing programs going into place. So I appreciate the moving forward to addressing that. The question that I had, and I think you started to mention it, so if I'm ahead of myself, I apologize. Do the two programs that we have, are they complementing the restorative approach? Are they integrating that into their strategies?
Absolutely. So I'll speak to the YSS first. You know, a big part of restorative approaches is doing conferencing and helping students who have conflict work things out, students and adults work things out, and the YSSs have been trained in restorative approaches and do assist with that. AHA is built upon a restorative philosophy. In fact, my first exposure to restorative justice was through a retreat that AHA provided probably 2 years before we ever piloted and brought some of us in. And so they definitely, with the social emotional part of building relationships and having healthy relationships, the work that they do is especially complementary. And the peace builders, we went back to AHA this year after we'd done the evaluation of RA and said, we really want the students to be a part of this. How can we do this? And AHA was very, very responsive to working with Laura on how can we, how can we make this work? And so I want to compliment them publicly on their willingness to do that.
I know when we met with the students, I think it was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, the thing that kept coming up was their relationship with teachers. So I think that's a critical piece in this, and I appreciate them being now integrated, part of the peace builders being integrated in the restorative circles and or being reactive. So I think that'll go a long way to make that happen. And then one question with regards to Kata. So they are seeking the $100,000. Is that to expand the program? Is it because cost increased, or?
It's $160,000, and that is not to expand the program, just as is. And so I was able to be frank with them about our district situation in terms of making the cuts. And so we'll be meeting on the 17th with a group of administrators to talk about how we're going to make it work. And it may include cutting services in certain areas if need be.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Reed.
So they're going to need to lay out what the 160,000 will cover.
Well, we really don't have the 160,000, so what we need to lay out is how do we make this work? And how do we provide students with the services they need for the 290,000 and the in-kind that we provide?
And also, AHA, the idea with the Peace Builders working with the teachers, I think that's fabulous. Has that, you're saying that hasn't happened yet, or it's something they're going to start to do?
What we did was at the beginning of the year, Laura and I met with the folks from AHA and asked them, how could we integrate Peace Builders? Because what they were doing was they were being trained and they were out and they keep track on an app of all the connections they make with other students, but we really wanted it to be more part of our system as we were trying to make changes and improve our work. So they went back and retrained, and Laura can speak to this in our next presentation, but I think it was in December, they brought their groups together and started training. And we've had to kind of redo it and figure out how to make it work. And so this has been a year of seeing how we can include the students in doing it, and then I think next year we'll really be doing a much more thorough launch. They're going to be training students in June, and we're hoping to have our new deans of student engagement involved in that training with the students, because they'll be the ones calling on the students to help, and also getting the word out to teachers to, here are your Peace Builders in your classes, use these students, talk with these students, because they're your ambassadors.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions at this point?
Only that I believe they got a $75,000 from the Women's Fund, which may be why they're able to offset it, but they had a thorough investigation of the work they did, and they were one of the key awardees last night. So I thought that was pretty impressive.
Yes.
Great. Okay, that brings us to H4, presentation of restorative approach evaluation.
Would you like the clicker? I didn't put that there. All right, well, one member of our team is missing, and again, that's Dr. Guillermo Juan. We started working on the restorative approaches evaluation right off the bat. I think when I came into the office in July of 2015, I met with Dr. Guillermo Juan and said, okay, we've been at restorative approaches for a little bit. We need to figure out what's working and what's not. So this is the much-awaited presentation of that evaluation. And I'm going to start, and then I'll turn it over to Laura Wooster-Dorfman, who is our TOSA. Our goal, we have to ask, why did the Santa Barbara Unified School District entertain the idea of utilizing restorative approaches? There are a number of things. We are unique in many ways, but we're not really unique in this area. This is a change that is happening nationwide, and it was really in response to the the plain fact that zero tolerance policies were not working, do not work. The research bore that out. We knew that we had issues around school culture. We needed to keep students in class. There's the irony of exclusion. I mean, the very students who we most need to be in class and be learning were being excluded from class, either because teachers were, there's that get out, go, or suspension, whatever it was, those students were not in class. We also needed to decrease our disproportionality. I brought to you several months ago our data around discipline, and we are starting to shrink those disproportionalities, but we know that especially our Latino students, our African American students were being suspended and expelled at rates much higher than their representation in our population. So that was the goal, and that was the why. The traditional methods of zero tolerance did not work. And so we embarked on looking at restorative justice. It was over, I believe it was 18 months, perhaps 20 months. We sent 3 teams of folks to Denver to see what Denver Public Schools were doing. And Lidl Garcia was part of that initial group, and Santa Barbara Junior High, he stepped up and said Santa Barbara Junior High will be the first to take this on. We decided it was important to do a slow rollout. And so the first year it was Santa Barbara Junior High. Then it was the other 3 junior highs joined in, along with Santa Barbara High School. The year after that, and actually La Cuesta joined in that year as well. And then the other traditional high schools, along with several elementary schools. We're at the point now where next year we will conclude our rollout. The last 3 elementary schools will be joining in. So we embarked it was August of 2015, on a qualitative study. Dr. Guillermo Juan did all of the heavy lifting in this area. She was invaluable in designing the research method. We worked together, met for about an hour and a half a week throughout the school year, specifically on this evaluation process. What it came down to was Laura and Chelsea met in focus groups for 60 to 90 minutes. There were student focus groups. There were focus groups of certificated staff, classified staff, and then finally administrators. I should say I had to take over in January, and I got to participate in the focus groups and do that because Laura went and had a baby. So I did get to join in the process. You can see that we had a total of 240 people from students and different types of staff who we were able to listen to. Again, these were semi-structured interviews that were conducted. What I bring to you tonight are our district outcomes. It's important, though, for you to know that each of the schools got their own report similar to this. So we don't bring that to you tonight, but we bring you the district report. What we found was that in terms of the RA philosophy, we call it restorative approaches. Other schools call it restorative discipline. Restorative justice is what it was originally and is well known as because it did originate in the prisons. We found that the philosophy for restorative approaches, this idea that we are one community, the idea of Ubuntu, which means I am because we are, that all members of a school campus belong and should be there. We really found that we were advancing, that people believe in the RA philosophy. In terms of the techniques and the logistics is where we were stumbling. And what it really, if I were going to encapsulate it in just kind of what my big takeaway from this was, is that restorative approaches is a philosophy. It's a way of being, it's a lens, it's a way of thinking, it's a way of interacting with other people and being in relationship with other people. The hard part are the systems, the techniques. How do you do it? Because when you're used to being able to send a kid to the office who's driving you crazy, that's a hard habit to break. But people want to do it. And so that gave us hope. If we had come up with RA philosophy down at beginning or developing, we would have been in dire straits. But that's the good news. The best news I bring to you is people want to do this. The second question we asked were, are students, family, and staff members better off because of restorative approaches? And the students brought to us really the barriers that they were experiencing. All students reported that they were having trouble, that there were student-to-student problems that were barriers to their success in school, regardless of their ethnicity or their background. And I should say, important for you to know, we did conduct the focus groups with white student focus groups and students of color separate, because we wanted, that was really, because of the disproportionality, it was important for students to be able to speak their truth in those groups. What we found was that Latino students at all schools reported student to adult issues, whereas white students did not. Some schools, they did report that at an increased level, but not at all schools. So when it came down to students talking about, what really mitigates those barriers, they came up with a number of things that they needed. And the first was, and this goes back to what we talked about earlier, developing adult-student relationships. Number one, most important. Developing student-to-student relationships in the classroom. Teachers giving students the opportunity to develop relationships with each other as learners. Developing mutual respect. They don't want to be confronted in front of other students. They want to be pulled to the side. And I will share one quick anecdote of one of the best things I saw during the focus groups, and that was a teacher at La Cumbre Junior High she has an area in her classroom called Antarctica. And when a student's having a hard time, she doesn't embarrass them. She goes over and she goes, Antarctica, because that's where they go cool off. She has the reflection paperwork there in the corner, and it's very respectful. And that just really stuck with me, was that when we do things like that with students, when we provide them with those opportunities and do it in a respectful way, it sticks, and that's what they need. Students want confidentiality through the RA process, in conferences, and students do want to be connected to outside resources. We talked about our community partners. We have plenty. They want to know about resources. They want information. They want help. So that's what they told us. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Laura to speak with you, because really, once we had the results, and we've had the results for about almost a year now, what we found was that it was time to improve our practices. Now what? And so we spent this year working on responding to the outcome of this evaluation. And so Laura, who does the heavy work in this area, she's our TOSA, and it's important for you all to know what our TOSAs do. And so Laura's going to talk to you about how we've responded to to the evaluation.
Thank you. Good evening, all. First of all, we wanted to address the area of logistics, and we did this in a few different ways. So when I worked at Santa Barbara High School, we had lovingly named a group the Raft, and that stood for Restorative Approaches Focus Team. So Fran and I decided to bring this to our district, and so we developed a Raft with 4 administrators, one from an elementary school site, one from a middle school, and 2 from high school sites, as well as Fran and myself. And we worked together to talk about what's coming up on your campus, what is going well, what needs work. Here are evaluation results. What can we do? Where can we go from here? So they were our sounding board, and they were our team that came together to talk about on-the-ground work that needed to be done. And then we took that work and we talked to the assistant principals group that we meet with. How often? Once a month? Okay. So we talked with the assistant principals group, and then we would go back to Raft and then back to the assistant principals group. So it was a lot of collaborative work on these logistics in our district. From that, we researched and borrowed and stole a few different documents from some Denver schools. They willingly gave them over to us, and we modified them to work for our district. And you had these in your narrative as an appendix, and it was, we call it the discipline suite. So it consists of a matrix that we feel was a huge help to administrators across our sites in making things systemic and consistent with their discipline practices. So this talks about when you have to suspend a student, when you have to expel a student, or if you don't have to, here are some other alternatives like using restorative approaches. So this way we could calibrate across our district and try to make our practices equitable across the board. We also had a ladder, and this was just a chart that has different levels of offenses on there. So if this happens in your classroom, what happens? And then you go to the next step, and then what happens? And then you go to the next step, and then what happens? So it's kind of a roadmap for teachers as well as administrators when things come up in class, what they should be doing. And then we also had a flow chart to help administrators as well as teachers to see if things were appropriate to be solved using restorative approaches when using it with discipline. So if a participant is not willing to accept responsibility for their part in something, it's not an appropriate time to use restorative approaches as a formal method for working with them on discipline. So we gave them this suite in order to try to calibrate across our district and to have everyone have the same language and the same understanding of what should be happening using restorative approaches in our discipline practices. Along with that, we found we have 5 R's as part of restorative approaches, and our last one is reintegration, and this is reintegrating students back into the classroom after something happens. So, for example, if a student and a teacher get in a fight one day in class, what happens the next day when the student comes back? Is that student welcomed back with open arms, new day, ready to go, or is it an awkward thing where they feel left out, where they feel like they're shunned by their peers or their teacher? So we really wanted to make sure that students were welcomed back and reintegrated. Part of that is with our readmit meetings. So after students are suspended, they have to have a readmit meeting with an administrator, hopefully their parents, sometime a teacher, to welcome them back to campus. So we also researched and are now piloting a meeting instead of a readmit meeting we call a welcome back meeting. And this is a meeting where we talk about strengths of the student, and then we talk about barriers to their success, and we talk about ways to keep them engaged and successful on campus. So this is another thing that came from Raft and from our AP meetings that's currently being used right now. And then we also talked about communication and clarification, especially with administrators and teachers. We felt like a lot of times we heard restorative approaches is nice, but we send students to the office and nothing happens. Well, we all know that that's generally not the case. Something is happening, but that communication was breaking down, and we really wanted to be sure that administrators were clear with teachers and staff about what was happening so that there could be that trust restored and so that everyone would be on the same page and that reintegration piece could be a lot more smooth. And then we also talked or found from our evaluation that we needed to improve techniques. So I worked on this year as far as my professional learning offerings. We really focused a lot on support staff as well as teachers this year, but we did trainings for classified staff, for our yard duties, for our campus safety, and for different groups on campus that weren't traditionally trained. And that has been really helpful because in order for this philosophy to work across a full campus, everybody needs to understand what it is, be on board, have the same language. So we worked on that. I also did more professional learning offerings on relationship building and relationships. I think that is the cornerstone to restorative approaches, the relationships between staff on campus, students and staff, students and students. A lot of teachers are on board and say, great, that's awesome. I want to build relationships, but how do I do it? And so we did more relationship building, professional learning, and I also have resources online for them, like a relationship building idea bank, where teachers can go and get ideas for doing fun activities in class to maintain those relationships throughout the year. We also did a lot of professional learning this year with the assistant principals. We did things in their meetings like modeling what a conference looks like, and we had some assistant principals role play. We also talked through specific techniques that they needed to use or that they were struggling with, or different things that were happening on their campus, certain scenarios. And then I also tried to do individual coaching this year. And this happened in a variety of contexts. This sometimes happened with teachers that were having a hard time with their classes, whether with classroom management, organizations, things along those lines. I tried to bring a restorative lens to the situation and tried to I would observe and give suggestions about different things that they could try in their classroom. We had some great success with a few different teachers, so that was a really satisfying experience, and it was really gratifying to be in the classroom, and also really nice to be around students again because I'm not around them as much as I used to be. And I would also work individually in classrooms on request when teachers needed help with a restorative circle. So I could help run proactive circles, or I could also help run reactive circles so that they could participate and be a part of the community, but also to show them what that looks like and to model for them so that they could run those individually when I'm not there as well. Back to you.
And so looking forward to 2017-18, we will, I mentioned this earlier, complete our rollout to Santa Barbara Community Academy, McKinley, and Adams Elementary School. There is a rubric that is in your appendix. That rubric was just organically developed out of the evaluation, and we'll be working with our administrators on how to use the rubric to assess at the site level on moving forward. We have our Dean of Student Engagement position that we are hiring for next week already. I want to thank Ms. Carey for helping move that along, bring that along. We all understand that we really need one administrator on site who is focused on restorative approaches. When we looked at the Denver model, Denver has a coordinator at each of its school sites who oversees restorative approaches. We tried to do the Denver model here in Santa Barbara without that. And I call it, we tried to do it on the cheap. And but about 3 months ago, I was doing a reading about restorative justice. And, this is not a new concept, even in the last 20, 30 years. This is rooted in all sorts of communities throughout history, the use of the restorative idea. And so each community has to make it its own. And so Santa Barbara Unified, that's what we're doing now, is we're making restorative justice fit our needs. And so the Dean of Student Engagement is a really important part of that. And then I'm going to be conducting listening sessions throughout the year next year. That will help me get out onto sites more, which is a goal that I have. But also just to see how things are going, to make sure that we're moving forward. So those are our plans for 2017-18. And now it's time for your questions and comments.
Thank you. That was super comprehensive, and it's great. I mean, I think the last time I saw you up there, you were very pregnant. And how old is your child now?
14 months-ish.
14 months-ish.
Yeah.
And so it's fabulous to get this all pulled together and to see that, it's really been moving forward in a positive way, and that you've been using that information that you were deep in the middle of gathering as fast as you could before you went on maternity leave. And so I really, really appreciate that. Any questions on this from board members?
I just want to say thank you for all the work that you've done, and together as a team, you have framed a really great program, but also evaluating it and then coming up with suggestions and answers to focus on. So if all programs could be this way, right? So thank you for all the hard work, and I think it'll be interesting for you to be out in the field and actually hearing what the students have to say, because that's really what we're trying to help, right? Support the students out there. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And this brings us to item I on the agenda. If needed, return to consent items designated for discussion. I did pull one item, that was E7. This is approval of, sorry, there were two Dos Pueblos in a row. This is approval of Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy engineering machine shop teacher. And the reason I pulled that one was because the background on it was that the Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy engineering machine shop teacher position has been part of the DPEA program through ROP for the past 2 years. In anticipation of ROP sunsetting, DPEA came to an agreement with the district last year that this would become a district job as part of the DPEA SBUSD. And the reason I pull it is because the DPEA MOU came through as a consent agenda item in May of last year as a continuation of the existing MOU, and that there was no financial impact to the district. And so I feel like there actually is a financial impact to the district. And I know that Mr. Jate is in the process of sort of analyzing that MOUs with other academies, because other academies, of course, want parity. And so I just want to, I really feel like we shouldn't take action on this until we have that all figured out, which hopefully would be within the next couple of weeks in terms of where we are moving forward. But I'm just really hesitant at this point to take action on this at all, and I would request that we pull that until we have a better picture of that MOU in context with MOUs that we have with our other academies, if that is okay with board members.
Yeah, I concur.
Okay. Thank you. And that, at this point, brings us to, it would normally bring us to J, but we were not able to finish item B5 on closed session. So at this point, with my fellow board members' permission, since we need to come out and report anyway, I would recommend that we move back into closed session and tackle item B5, and then we'll come back out and report and handle those last few items on the agenda. Okay? So we're going to move back into closed session.